Be sure you download the note card that goes along with this sermon, and you can print it out and you can follow along, fill it in as you follow the sermon. If you like this sermon, want to see more like this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, also hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when other new content is added to this site. We try to add sermons as often as we can. We'll try to add some Bible question and answers that we've done before in the past, other things we may be adding to this. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to follow us on social media, there are links to our social media accounts in the video description below. Now, let's jump into the sermon.
The Bible can be broken down into 17 time periods. These time periods can be put into 3 dispensations. The patriarchal dispensation that would cover before the flood, 1404, some people say 4114 for the creation, but depending on where you put the creation as to how this chart's going to come out. Before the flood up to the time of the Exodus would be covered in what we know as the patriarchal time period. Mosaical dispensation then would cover Exodus, the Exodus. Some people say 1700. There, I have seen dates in 1446 BC. Have a chart that will show it that way. Part of that would be then the wilderness wandering all the way up to, we get into the New Testament, to the life of Christ. The early church, you would say, would be covered in the Mosaical dispensation. Christian dispensation would start the early church, day of Pentecost, resurrection of Jesus, would start the Christian dispensation all the way up to the end of time. In this time period, we come to our study of the book of Numbers that we started in the last lesson. This is lesson number 2 of a 10-part series on the book of Numbers. We've covered the introduction material, the history of Israel's 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, brought about because of their listening to the 10 spies rather than Joshua and Caleb. The name for the book of Numbers is taken from a census that was twice taken, chapter 1, chapter 26. Again, the date coverage will be different depending on whose chart you look at. 1444 BC to roughly 1405, somewhere thereabout in that time period. Israel as a nation is in its infancy at this time. They were still encamped at Mount Sinai, only 13 months after leaving Egypt, the Exodus. And again, we noted the date at the end of Exodus 40, verse 17, gives us the first month, second year, and then the date for the beginning of the Numbers, book of Numbers, in Numbers 1:1, gives us the second year, second month, so there a month time period is given for the instructions that were given in the book of Leviticus that we have just concluded. Here is the traditional journey that people have taught for years, that this is the way from Mount Sinai, Jebel Musa, to Kadesh Barnea. This, again, is the traditional. Now, there have been a lot of discoveries in recent years that debunk a lot of this, and so we come up with an alternate route from Egypt to Kadesh Barnea, and then how they would wind up going into Canaan, as you see on this map. The overview of Numbers here, I've developed this little chart for you. It's the fourth book of the Old Testament, 36 chapters. Again, it's part of the Pentateuch, written around 1400 BC. Again, you'll see various dates for that. Time period covered, 1450, 1446 I've seen before, to 1400, somewhere in that area. Moses is the author. We are in the first section. Israel prepares to leave Mount Sinai. The Israelites complete the tabernacle. Moses completes the Levitical law we just studied. The people prepare to leave Mount Sinai. Moses conducts a census recording the numbers of male adults in the tribes, excluding Levites, and this is the age that are able to go to war, be in the military. Up to 50 years old, I believe. Numbers, this little project from Bible Project it's called. Here's an overview, a visual overview. I like visual overviews. Rebellion in the wilderness, God brings judgment. There it is, and shows mercy, what we see in this chapter. So what we have seen thus far, again, in this study, the exodus of Israel, covenant at Mount Sinai, they break the covenant, Exodus 32, the story of the golden calf, tabernacle and priest talked about in Leviticus. Now we are ready to enter the promised land. We talked about the census taken last week, the numbering in the census, and thus we will see that right here as we shift around and get it here, the placement of the Israelites around by tribe around the tabernacle. Here is a picture from a long time ago, a drawing from a long time ago, picture of, and the area that we are currently studying is this first section, Mount Sinai. They're getting ready to leave the area. The theme of Numbers is a consequence of disbelief in God and disobedience to God. Again, here's another little chart, kind of fuzzy, that kind of gives us the same thing in a written review. So preview, chapters 1 through 14 that we are in right now, the old generation. Then we're going to get a transitional period, because the old generation, again, is going to be rebel, going to disobey God, and thus they're all going to fall in the wilderness, a transition period while that happens, chapter 15 through 20. And then chapters 21 through 36, we have the new generation at the doorway to Canaan, ready to come in. So we're in part 1. Thus far, we have studied the organization of Israel, chapters 1 through chapter 4, verse 49. And then we're going to continue with our study after this, Sanctification of Israel, what we will talk about today. That's what we're going to talk about today. Continuing again, as we have looked at the failure of Israel en route to Kadesh, chapters 10 through 11 through chapter 12, 16. That'll be next lesson in this series, the next lesson. Then the lesson following, the climatic failure of Israel at Kadesh. We'll get into the failure of Israel in the wilderness, and then we'll get into the failure of Israel en route to Moab, chapters 20 through 25, verse 18. Part 3, the preparation of the new generation. Remember, the old generation will have died out by this time, to inherit the promised land. The reorganization, have to reorganize once again since we have a new generation. Regulations about the offerings and vows will be given again. 28:1 through chapter 30, verse 6. And then the conquest and division of Israel will complete the book of Numbers. So that's what we've got to look forward to in this study. So with that, let's go back into part 1, and we'll look at Numbers chapter 5 through chapter 10. They're getting ready to come out from Mount Sinai and go into the wilderness, hoping for a short trip into Canaan, but it's going to turn into a long trip because of disobedience. It wouldn't take that long if they hadn't disobeyed. So Numbers chapter 5. We begin looking at Numbers chapter 5. The Lord spoke to Moses to send away from the camp, out of the camp, the cleansing of the people. Here's what we have. The lepers, those with discharge, those unclean because of a dead person, going to be sent out. Again, the first 4 chapters we give the outward formation of the camp. The next 5 chapters gives the inward condition of the camp, what we're going to see. And we call this section in chapter 5, Sanctification through Separation. Numbers chapter 5 beginning, we have separating out from the lepers, those with skin disease that would be contagious to others coming in contact, those with discharges, those unclean because of a dead person. When a man or a woman commits any of the sins of mankind, acting unfaithfully against the Lord, he shall confess, going to make a restitution, plus 1/5 to whom he is wrong. The defiled, the reason these people are sent out. The ram of atonement, we have this in the first 5 verses. This is what the first 5 verses says. Verse 4, the children of Israel did so and put them out without the camp. So the Lord spake unto Moses, so did the children of Israel. They did exactly what the Lord wanted. And then we get into chapter 5 here on the left side, chapter 5, verse 5, that when a man or a woman commits any sin of mankind, acting unfaithfully against the Lord, he shall confess, make a restitution, 1/5, plus 1/5, to whom he has wronged. That's we call in the legal circles. That's called, what does it take to make a person whole? In God's eyes, to make a person whole, it's not just the replacement of what was taken wrongly but it was also adding 1/5 to that. Is what we have in chapter 5. Next, we have the law of jealousy. You call it. When a wife goes astray, we have verse 12. When a man's wife go aside and commits a trespass against him, defiles herself, this says. Or when a spirit of jealousy comes over a man. Man's going to be jealous, someone giving attention to his wife over him. What's going to happen? We find the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be defiled. Or if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and also not defiled, then shall the man bring his wife unto the priest. Going to bring her to the priest, and shall bring her offering for her the 10th part of an ephah of barley of meal. Grain offering we see in her hand there on the picture. He shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense thereon, for it is an offering of jealousy, an offering of memorial, bringing iniquity to remembrance. So there's going to be the priest, he's going to take the holy water in an earthen vessel, and of dust that is in the floor of the tabernacle, the priest shall take and put it upon the water. And the priest shall set the woman before the Lord, and uncover the woman's head, and put the offering of memorial in her hands, which is the jealousy offering. And the priest shall have his hand in the bitter water that causes the curse. Now here's the curse. The priest shall charge her by an oath, and say unto the woman, if no man have lain with you, and if you have not gone aside to uncleanness with another instead of your husband, be you free from this bitter water that causes the curse. But if she's been defiled, gone aside to another instead of your husband, and if you be defiled, and some man have lain with you beside your husband, then the priest shall charge the woman with an oath of cursing, and the priest shall say unto the woman, the Lord make you a curse and an oath among your people, when the Lord does make your thigh to rot, swell, waste away, and your belly to swell. That's the abdomen. And this water that causes the curse shall go into your bowels, into your inner digestive system, to make your belly to swell and your thigh to rot. And the woman shall say, Amen, amen. And the priest shall write these curses in a book, and he shall blot them out with the bitter water. So that's what we have going on in chapter 6. Again, like we saw in Leviticus, people are to maintain their wholeness to God. That's what takes place in chapter 5. Now, chapter 6, we begin looking at chapter 6. Again, the Lord speaks to Moses, saying, when a man or a woman makes a special vow. Now, this special vow is called a vow of a Nazirite, to dedicate himself to the Lord. Samson would be an example of that. His parents dedicated him to the Lord with a Nazirite vow. We find the Nazirite vow, he's not to come in contact with a dead person. He's not to come into anything that comes from a grape, be it wine, be it raisins, be it the grape itself. All the days of his separation, with Samson, it would have been all the days of his life. Nor is he to cut his hair. Notice, particularly here, this is sanctification through the Nazirite vow. Set you apart. You set yourself apart. The Nazirite vow would be volunteer based on the person, but here the parents of Samson in the book of Judges, we'll get to that when we get over there, did this. Sanctification. Now, an interesting thing here, verse 24. Drop down to verse 24. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. There's the benediction, a famous, a well-known benediction. We hear that all the time. We even sing that benediction in a song. We use it to the letter. And they shall put my name, God says, upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. That's what we see here. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, when he's fulfilled this Nazirite vow, he'll bring the offering to the tent of meeting. He's going to shave his hair that he had dedicated. Going to offer a drink offering. He's going to offer a male lamb, a ram peace offering, a ewe lamb, a sin offering. So you have three offerings: burnt offering, rededication, ram offering, sin offering, and then the grain offering. Don't leave out the grain offering, Mike. Verses 13 through 21 explains what we have going on in chapter 6. What takes place the 8th day, what will happen? He's going to bring in 2 young pigeons and to the door, and 2 turtle doves to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. The priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, the other for a burnt offering. So that's what we have. And then again, there down at the bottom, you see the benediction. Chapter 7 talks about free will offerings made for the tabernacle, the dedication of the tabernacle. We saw the sanctification of the people. Now we see sanctification through worship, chapters 7 through 9:14. On the day that Moses had finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed it, consecrated it with its furnishings and the altar and all its vessels. This was the dedication offering for the altar after it was anointed. And so this is what we have going on here in chapter 7, a little further explanation of the dedication of the tabernacle as we see it here. You can take time to read this. They brought their offering before the Lord, 6 covered wagons, 12 oxen, 6 and a wagon for 2 of the princes, and for each one an ox. And they brought them before the tabernacle. And the Lord said, take them, that they may be to do service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and you shall give them unto the Levites, to every man according to his service. Here's what we had: 12 silver dishes, 12 silver bowls, 2,400 shekels of silver. Both of them are going to be full of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering. 12 pans full of incense, 120 gold shekels we have involved there. So we have a burnt offering. We have 12 bulls. We have for a sin offering, we'll say, what goes on. 12 rams, 12 male lambs for the burnt offering. And then we finish all that up, 12 male goats for a sin offering, peace offering, 24 bulls, 60 rams, 60 male goats, 60 male lambs. That's what's involved in the dedication here in chapter 7 of the tabernacle. Setting up the tabernacle, then the tabernacle had to be dedicated, and that's what the whole chapter 7, is about. We won't take time to read through all that. You can read through that. I'll just give you the cliff notes on it, I guess, as they call it. We used to use cliff notes in school, so that's what we call it here. Verse 85, let's drop over. Each charger of silver weighing 130 shekels, each bowl 70 shekels. All the silver vessels weighed 2,400 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. Golden spoons were 12 full incense, weighing 10 shekels apiece after the shekel of the sanctuary, is what we have laid out in chapter 7. This is what we read about as we look at chapter 7. Here's what verse 78 says: On the 12th day, Ahira the son of Enam, the chief of the people of Naphtali, his offering was 1 silver plate, whose weight was 130 shekels, 1 silver basin of 70 shekels according to the shekel of the sanctuary, both of them full of fine mixed with oil for a grain offering, 1 golden dish of 10 shekels full of incense, 1 bull from the herd, 1 ram, 1 male lamb, a year old for a burnt offering, 1 male goat for a sin offering, he says, and for the sacrifice of peace offering, 2 oxen, 5 ram, 5 male goats, and 5 male lambs a year old. This was the offering of Ahira the son of Enan. Now, so that's gives us an idea of how the offering was there. Sanctification through worship. This section, chapter 7:1 through 9:14. Chapter 8. The Lord, in verse 2, chapter 8, speaks again. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and say to him, When you set up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand. And Aaron did so. He set up the lamps in front of the lampstand, as the Lord commanded Moses, and this was the workmanship of the lampstand, hammered work of gold from its base to its flower. It was hammered work according to the pattern that the Lord had shown Moses, so he made the lampstand. Moses says, Take the Levites from among the sons of Israel, cleanse them. Sprinkle purifying water on them. Let them use a razor over their whole body, wash their clothes, and they will be clean. Getting the priests ready. Now, we read this pretty well in Leviticus also. But getting ready for this trip. This is all in getting ready for this trip. They're going to go into the wilderness. You're going to separate the Levites from among the sons of Israel, and the Levites, he says in verse 14, shall be mine. Remember, for every firstborn, verse 17, for every firstborn among the sons of Israel is mine. On the day that I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I set them aside, that's what he says, for my service, sanctified them for myself, but I have taken the Levites instead of every firstborn among the sons of Israel. Now he takes the Levites, the whole tribe. And we studied that, the redemption of the firstborn, what was paid, 5 shekels, I believe it was, what was paid and how much difference there was. We studied that in the last lesson. How the priests were sanctified, consecrated to their work. That's what chapter 8 tells us. And we've studied this in Leviticus, so we won't go back through this, but if you want to read further and learn more about this, you can read these, 26 verses of chapter 8. Now, chapter 9, we get into the first Passover memorial observed. This would be fellowship with God, information on the guiding cloud. This was guidance from God. We're going to see that in verse 16 through 18. But before we get there, the first month, 14th day, and in the second month, 14th day. We've seen that from Exodus chapter 40, verse 17, Numbers 1:1. We've talked about this before. Here it is drawn up. Let the sons of Israel observe the Passover at its proper time. Sons of Israel and an alien who sojourn among you. He's going to talk about here in this passage. So what we learn here, he begins, as we look at these months up here on the calendar, on the 14th day of this month. Now we see what month he's talking about here. This was second month. Say 14th day of this month at twilight, you shall keep it at the appointed time according to all its statutes and all its rules. You're going to keep the Passover. That's what you're going to do. So Moses told the people of Israel that they should keep the Passover. They kept the Passover in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all the Lord commanded Moses, so the people did. So that's what we have. And there were certain men who were unclean through the touching of a dead body, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. Now we're going to learn what you do when someone is unclean and can't keep the Passover at the proper time. Let's see what happens. And these men said to him, we are unclean through touching of a dead body. Why are we kept from bringing the Lord's offering at its appointed time among the people of Israel? Moses said to them, wait, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. So the Lord speaks to Moses, verse 10, here's what he says. Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if any one of you or of your descendants is unclean through touching a dead body, or is on a long journey, he shall still keep the Passover to the Lord in the 2nd month. So we have a time that you normally are supposed to, but if something precludes you from doing that, touching of a dead body or a trip, you do it in the 2nd month on the 14th day. So that's what God instructs him to do. So the man who neglects to observe the Passover, that person shall be cut off from his people. So God gives you 2 chances there. And that man's going to bear his sin, what we find. And see, now, on the day that the tabernacle was erected, the cloud covered, we're looking at 15 or 16 now, the tent of the testimony, and in the evening it was like the appearance of fire over the tabernacle until morning. Now we're going to hear about the fire that's going to guide them by at night, and the cloud's going to guide them in the day. We've already talked about that in Exodus, but here it's stated again. Whenever the cloud was lifted from over the tent, the sons of Israel set out. And in the place where the cloud settled, they would camp. That cloud would tell them, camp here. So whether it was 2 days or a month or a year, that cloud lingered over the tabernacle. They remained camped, but when it was lifted, they set out, verse 22. So we learn how this guiding cloud is going to work. Numbers chapter 9. Now we get into Numbers chapter 10. Numbers chapter 10, we're going to learn about the silver trumpets that were made to give guidance for the ear, just as the pillar gave guidance for the eye. It would tell them by ear when to move. So we see sanctification, chapter 9:15 through the end of our study today, 10 verse 10, through divine guidance. God's going to tell you how to go. And here's a summary of this chapter. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make yourself 2 trumpets of silver for summoning the congregation. Again, we had this talked about in the book of Leviticus. Go back there and you can get more information on that. Here's a little chart. I guess it looked like an Excel chart turned sideways we might have today. They would hear both trumpets. The whole congregation would gather. They would hear one trumpet. The leaders would gather. And so they would blow the trumpet in one way, maybe even the pitch of the note or whatever, tonality. That would be a gathering. Then there would be another way to blow the trumpet. You would have an alarm. Camps on the east would set out. A second alarm. Camps on the south would set up. And when you go to war, that would be blown. And then it would be blown to offer a burnt offering and a peace offering. So that's what we have going on in these first 10 verses. We're going to learn about, we're learning about these trumpets. But when for example, look at verse 7. When the assembly is to be gathered together, you shall blow a long blast. See, there's the difference. But you shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall blow the trumpets. The trumpets shall be to you for a perpetual statute throughout your generation. And when you go to war in your land against the adversary who oppress you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. And on the day of your gladness also, here we have on the day of your gladness also, he says, At your appointed feast and at the beginning of your months you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offering, over the sacrifice of your peace offering. They shall be a reminder of you before your God. I am the Lord your God. So with that, that's where we'll end this study today as we have talked about sanctification. Our next lesson will be from Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, through chapter 14, verse 45. We will look at the failure of the old generation to inherit the promised land. And that's what we'll look at in our next lesson. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more, be sure to download the note card. Well, we don't have a note card for this lesson, but we might have some notes. But if they're here, they will be in the description below, but also our free Bible correspondence link where you can get a free Bible correspondence course that will help you in your study of the Word of God. You'll find the links to each in the description below. Tell others about this series and subscribe. If you'd like to help us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/MacMike, and there you'll learn how you can help us put these lessons up here for your enlightenment. Now, we here at the Spring Hill Church of Christ want to help you with your growth in the knowledge of God. Now, remember, we are in it for the likes and the subs, so be sure to subscribe. So thanks for watching or listening wherever you're picking these up, either video on Rumble or on Facebook, or you're picking them up at one of the 10 audio podcast sites where these are available. So thanks for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, see you next time. Cheerio. With that, Bob's your uncle.